Hello guys, and welcome to my first video on this channel. Today, as of the time I'm recording, is December 23rd, 2024, and today I'm going to be making my first predictions for the 2026 midterm elections. So, we will first be looking at the Senate elections and then the gubernatorial elections. Quick note, I will let you know that my margin characteristics are 10, 5, 2.5. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting with the Senate predictions, let me remind you that these elections are 2 years from now. So a lot of my predictions are just based on the partisanship of a state, or maybe I'll give battleground incumbents the advantage because we don't know who they are running against yet. So let's begin with the safe Republican seats. States I feel like shouldn't be too controversial being listed as safe red. Alaska has gone to Donald Trump by more than 10% each time. The incumbent, Dan Sullivan, won by more than 10% last time. I believe it'll likely go red by more than 10 again. Idaho, Montana, John Tester, despite being an incumbent, still lost the race by about 7%. And Steve Daines, the incumbent, who will be up for re-election this year, I believe he's running. If not, then I'll make a new prediction eventually. He won by more than 10% last time, even against what seemed like a popular governor, Steve Bullock, and so I believe he'll win by more than 10 again. Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas. Roger Marshall actually won by a pretty narrow margin for a Kansas Republican back in 2020, but I still feel like he'll win by more than 10% again, just because of Kansas's partisanship, as well as Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, West Virginia. Texas, I'm going to put as safe red, despite the threats of a primary challenge against Senator John Cornyn. I just feel like Texas went red by more than 10% this year for Donald Trump. Ted Cruz won by a little under 10, but he doesn't seem to be as popular as John Cornyn, so I feel like John Cornyn will still win the race by more than 10%. Florida, we've seen it in this election. Donald Trump won it by about 13%. Rick Scott won by more than 10%. So I feel like whoever Marco Rubio's replacement is, or whoever's going to be running come 2026, will still win Florida by more than 10%. And now my final safe Republican seat is going to be the state of Iowa. I'm putting Iowa in the safe Republican column because, as I keep saying with Texas, Florida, Donald Trump won the state by more than 10%. And Joni Ernst, I feel like, is still likely to win by similar margin, despite the threats of another, just like Texas, just like threats of a primary challenge, because of her, refusal to confirm Pete Hegseth. There were rumors of people floating around a primary challenge against her, but I still feel like, regardless, obviously she'll probably win the primary, and she will win the election by more than 10%. Now moving on to the safe Democratic seats, I do believe that Oregon will be safe Democratic. Colorado, even against Kamala Harris, still won that state by more than 10. Illinois, my home state, whether Dick Durbin retires or not, Illinois, very partisanship, same thing. Illinois went to Kamala Harris by more than 10%, so I'm sure whoever the Democratic candidate is for Senate will still win by that margin. Delaware, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, shouldn't be too controversial. New Jersey, I had thought about this whenever I was first playing this out. I didn't know whether to put it as safe or likely, but I do feel like, even with the results of this election, Kamala Harris only winning by 5.9%, Andy Kim winning by a little under 10%, I do feel like with Donald Trump off the ballot, that Cory Booker will still have an easy re-election, probably winning by more than 10% as well. Alright, and that is the final of the safe Democratic states. Now, something you may realize, Republicans are already at 50 seats in the Senate, and of course with J.D. Vance as vice president, that means that even just with safe Republican states, I have them retaining the Senate, even though the Class 2 races haven't been too bad historically, except for 2014. 2008, 2020 were relatively good years for them in the Senate, but it just doesn't look like they have a lot of inroads to flip back the Senate this year. So, now moving on to likely Republican states, I have two, I believe it's two. I do think that Ohio will be likely red. Now, despite the fact that Donald Trump won this by more than 11%, and Bernie Moreno won by just about 4%, I do feel like J.D. Vance's replacement will win Ohio probably by a little bit more than he did 2 years ago. Of course, Bernie Moreno only won the state by 4%, but that was against a relatively popular incumbent. I don't know about popular, but he overperformed Kamala Harris by about, I believe, 15%. So, against, like I said, that's 4% margin of victory against an incumbent who had already served 3 terms, and with Donald Trump on the ballot. I do feel like even with Donald Trump off the ballot, Ohio will go red by more than 5%, just because, sorry, interruptions. I do believe that Ohio will go red by a likely margin. It'll be less than 10, because I feel like on the off chance that Sherrod Brown, who has hinted that he may run for the seat, I do believe even though he won't lose by as little as he did this year, I do believe he will still narrow it up to under 10 points. And I'm putting it above a lean Republican because Ohio's partisanship, there's not going to be an incumbent Democrat, so that takes off the incumbency advantage. And Donald Trump, again, won the state by 11% this year. And so I still feel like Ohio will be a likely Republican state. Alright, now on to our next likely Republican. I do believe that Maine will be likely Republican. Susan Collins, I believe, let me pull up the 2020 results. I believe she has won by more than 10% in all of her Senate elections. However, Republicans have just gotten more and more unhappy with her, of course, because, you know, she's a relatively anti-Trump Republican, she's a moderate, and of course, Maine is a blue state, so a lot of people have actually considered this to be a possible pickup, and of course, that's entirely possible. Like, I'm not going to be shocked at all if Maine flips, but it's just Susan Collins has been elected 5 times, I think, and I just don't find this to be the year where she gets kicked out. Of course, she might, and I actually do have her winning by the smallest of all of her Senate races. I believe I've got the results right here. She has, in fact, actually, she did win Maine by a likely margin last time, but I still think she'll probably do slightly worse than 2020, but regardless, I do think just because of her moderate Republican ideologies and stuff, and all of the Democrats crossing over to vote for her, I still think that she will likely retain her seat. Alright, that's all the likely Republican states. Now on to the likely Democratic states. First off, the state of New Mexico. Now, impressively, even against the Trump down ballot effect, Martin Heinrich, who was reelected this year, just won re-election by more than 10%. However, I do feel like Ben Ray Lujan, who will be up for re-election, won by less than 10% last time. And of course, New Mexico went for Kamala Harris by 6%. So I think it's, no pun intended, likely that it will be a likely Democratic state, but one that stays in Democratic hands regardless. Now on to the state of Minnesota. That will be likely Democratic. Tina Smith, who is the incumbent, actually only won re-election by 5.2% in 2020, which is actually underperforming Joe Biden. And so I feel like she'll probably win by more than she did last time because there was actually a third-party candidate in the 2020 election in Minnesota, Senate election. But I still feel like, especially with Minnesota's trending to the right, Kamala Harris won by 4%. Amy Klobuchar won by a large margin, but she's a very popular incumbent regardless. So I feel like that Minnesota will go Democratic between 5 and 10% in 2026. Alright, I believe that is the last likely Democratic state. Oh wait, no, one more. Virginia. I believe Virginia will be likely Democratic. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we don't know who Mark Warner is running against. I believe, let me see if he's declared, yeah, he's not declared Mark Warner. He's running for re-election. If he does run for re-election, of course, the incumbency advantage. I mentioned at the start that, if we don't have much detail of who's declared, then I'm just going to go off the incumbency advantage. And Virginia went blue at the Senate level, or excuse me, presidential level by about 5% this year. Senate level, I can't remember, I think it was like 8-9%. And so I feel like Mark Warner will win by a likely margin, unless he's running against Glenn Youngkin, in which, of course, if he does declare his candidacy, then I'll reshape Virginia's prediction. But as of right now, with no really declared candidates, I believe, I'm going to list Virginia as a likely Democratic state. Now, I don't have any lean Republican states, so let's move on to lean Democratic. I have one, and that is the state of New Hampshire. I believe that Jeanne Shaheen, who is running for re-election, she won by about 15–16% in 2020. However, as we saw, New Hampshire was a very interesting state this election. No, they didn't have a Senate election this year, but at the presidential level, it was Kamala Harris's closest state. She won by a little under 3%. Kelly Ayotte won the gubernatorial election, who is a Republican, by 9%. She's not even the incumbent. And so New Hampshire is really just an interesting state for this election. I'm putting it as lean D because despite the fact that Jean Shaheen won by a large margin in 2020, I'm just playing it safe, and maybe she'll win by a pretty small margin. Let me go back to the 2014 election. Yeah, she only won that election by 3.2% as the incumbent. And so, of course, she has won by a lean margin before. And I feel like just playing it safe, New Hampshire, we're going to list as lean Democratic for this scenario. Alright, so we're done with the lean Democratic states. Now we have the big three. Despite the fact that I've already given Republicans control of the Senate, these three are the ones that people really have their eye on. One has an incumbent Republican, North Carolina. Two have incumbent Democrats, Michigan and Georgia. I'll start with North Carolina, which, like I said at the beginning of this video, we don't have much data for who is running yet. We have some speculation. We have, someone whose announcement is pending. But because we don't have officially declared candidates, except for the incumbent Tom Tillis, as of right now, due to North Carolina's partisanship, I will list North Carolina as tilt Republican, which means Tom Tillis will win that means I believe Tom Tillis will win by less than 2.5%. Now, of course, there are threats of a primary challenge in North Carolina. Just June of last year, he was censured by the North Carolina Republican Party because he supported gun control, same-sex marriage. He was censured by the state party for that. There's a lot of Republicans pretty unhappy with him. There's even, speculation about, it was one of the Trump family members, but Laura Trump. There was even speculation about Laura Trump running against him, trying to primary him. If he does get primaried, then maybe North Carolina becomes tilt D because of, split in the North Carolina Republican Party. However, of course, because there's no primary challenge announced yet, Tom Tillis is the only one who has declared. I'm going to list North Carolina as tilt Republican. Now, of course, can't forget about the Democratic side. Apparently, Wiley Nickel, who, just for a couple more months, who is the representative for North Carolina's 13th Congressional District, he has an announcement pending. Apparently, it's expected in, February 2025. If that's the case, I don't know. He's a North Carolina Democrat. I don't know much about him. So I can't say how you'd really do against Tom Tillis, but as for Roy Cooper, who has expressed interest in running, and it's possible that Wiley Nickel would drop out or something if Roy Cooper announced. If Roy Cooper ran, then maybe it's also tilt D because Roy Cooper did win the state by 4% back in 2020, and so he's won he has won, I believe, let me see, counting Attorney General, he's won 6 statewide elections at least in North Carolina, so clearly it's not out of the realm for him to be elected, but you've got two, not really incumbents, but Roy Cooper, who was the most recent Democratic governor, except for Josh Stein when he takes office, and Tom Tillis, the incumbent senator. North Carolina is really it's one of the 3 toss-ups, I would say. It really could go either way. I'm just going off the fact that we don't know entirely who's running yet, except for Tom Tillis and most likely Wiley Nickel. I'm just going to list North Carolina as tilt Republican because of North Carolina's partisanship. Just for now, when we get more data, maybe I'll change it. But as of right now, North Carolina is going to be tilt Republican. I'm sorry for rambling a lot, by the way. I tend to do that a lot. Alright, now moving on to Michigan and Georgia. Now, these 2 states, I probably had a more difficult time going on with deciding how they were going to fit. I'll start with Michigan. And the same thing, let me see what data we have on that election. I believe Gary Peters will likely win. Yeah, there's really no data for who's running in that election. I believe Gary Peters will probably win, or excuse me, Gary Peters will probably run for re-election. I don't see why not. And if he does, and of course the incumbency advantage starts off, of course, in the last election, he actually won by about 1.7%. which was, a tilt margin, also underperforming Joe Biden in the concurrent presidential election. So Gary Peters, despite the fact that he did win last time, it was by a almost 2% margin, a pretty small margin of victory, even as an incumbent. John James put up a good challenge against him. And so it is hard to say, just because, like I mentioned, there is really no data for who's running in that election yet. I'm going to, as for now, same thing with North Carolina, list the incumbency advantage as my reasoning. Michigan, for now, is going to be tilt blue. Of course, it could easily flip. If John James runs for that seat again, who knows? Maybe he'll win. Let me think of other Michigan Republicans. I don't know. Tudor Dixon runs, probably going to lose. I mean, she lost to Gretchen Whitmer by more than 10%. And so, yeah, Michigan, just for now, is going to be tilty, but it remains to be seen if that could change. Alright, finally, our final Senate election. I've been doing this for 16 minutes. Good God. Georgia. Georgia is definitely the most, probably the most toss-up. Because you've got the incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff, who is running for re-election. He has declared his intent to run for a second term. And as for the Republican side, there's two candidates that have publicly expressed interest. You've got a representative for Georgia's 1st Congressional District, Buddy Carter. And there is a couple potential candidates. One of them, of course, being Brian Kemp, the incumbent governor. He will be term limited come 2026. So I find it very reasonable for someone to suspect that he will run for the seat. If he does run, then I'd probably put it as like lean Republican or something. But because he has not declared or even publicly expressed interest, for now, same thing. I'm going to list Georgia, same reasoning as Michigan and North Carolina. I do believe with the incumbency advantage, as of right now, Georgia will be tilt Democratic. And so, there we go. There's my Senate prediction for the 2026 midterms. My first one, as you can see, no flips. No Senate election will be a flip for either party at all as of right now. North Carolina. The 4 states that I feel like are likely to flip: North Carolina and Maine on the Republican side, Michigan and Georgia on the Democratic side. Now, real quick, one point that I do want to bring up in regards to the Georgia race. I saw something like on the Wikipedia page for it that one of the potential candidates is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And if that happens, we might as well just list Georgia as safe Democratic. No, I'm kidding. Probably likely, maybe lean at worst for Jon Ossoff. I don't think there needs to be much rationale behind that. I mean, she's not very popular, let's say, and kind of, viewed very interestingly by even fellow Republicans. And even, I think, there was an article that said Donald Trump was, saying he would fight like hell if she ran. Yeah, good luck with that one, buddy. But, yeah, just something I wanted to bring up. If Marjorie Taylor Greene runs for the Senate election in Georgia, I'm going to keep my eye on that one, let's just say. Alright, so, that is the complete Senate map. As I mentioned, 47 for Democrats, 53 for Republicans as of right now. And the funny thing is, theoretically, it could still be 47-53 if, Democrats flip North Carolina, maybe Maine, and Georgia and Michigan flip red. Then, yeah, there you go. So, yeah, that is my, as of right now, Senate prediction for the 2026 midterms, my first one. We are, let me do some quick math here. We are about 23 months away from the elections, and of course a lot can change between now and then, but this is my prediction for right now. Alright, so, thank you for sitting for this Senate prediction. Now, this is going to be a pain in the butt for my computer to upload. Let us move on to our gubernatorial elections. So here is the map starting out. Of course, it's what I've dubbed, I believe, the Class 2 governor seats. This is the one that has the most governor seats up for contest. The midterms always have the most governor seats up for election, and just a little fact there. And so, something interesting here, there's a lot of term limit. I apologize, I've been talking for 20 minutes. There's been a lot of term limited. There is going to be a lot of term limited governors for 2026. Good God. On the Republican side, you've got Alaska, Wyoming, Oklahoma, Ohio. These the bottom right 5 southern states. You've got California, Colorado, New Mexico, Kansas, Michigan, Maine on the Democratic side. There's going to be a lot of term-limited governors, which, of course, you know, gets rid of the incumbency advantage no matter what. So, let us begin our predictions here. Now, let me just pull up my map that I already prepared. Okay, so let's start off with safe Republican governor seats. I believe will stay in the Republican column by more than 10%. First will be Alaska. Mike Dunleavy actually won by more than 50%. 2 years ago, for re-election. No Republican has done that in like a couple decades, I'm pretty sure. He won without having to do ranked choice voting and stuff like that. So, very likely going to be, I mean, with Alaska's way of voting, I don't know if it will be more than 10%, but his victory margin will be more than 10%, let's say that. I don't think that's too controversial to say. Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, not too controversial. Texas, I believe, I'm pretty sure, let me double check. Yes, Greg Abbott is running for re-election to a fourth term, a fourth full term, which also would put him as the longest serving governor in the state's history, even longer than Rick Perry. Just fun fact there. He's won by more than 10% all three of his elections. However, each one of them has been increasingly close, but I still feel like he'll win by more than 10 regardless. That's weird. Why the heck is Louise? Oh. Sorry. For some reason, I posted my predictions to Reddit, and I was pulling up my maps, and one of them accidentally got glitched. They're fine now. Okay, so yeah. Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida. I don't think that's too controversial, even though it'll be an open seat. I mean, Ron DeSantis won by 20 points 2 years ago, and like I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump, Rick Scott won by like 13%. Even though it'll be an open seat, I just don't see Florida narrowing down to less than 10. I don't know if we have any declared candidates in that race yet. Let me see. Well, Matt Gaetz has publicly expressed interest. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. So yeah, Florida will still probably be like a safe Republican too. Alright, and our final safe Republican gubernatorial. Oh wait, no, we got two more, but actually 3 more. Sorry, I've been recording for 23 minutes. Anytime I record for a while, I start to lose my train of thought easily. So yeah, Florida's probably going to be more than 10, even with it being an open seat, even if Matt Gaetz becomes the Republican nominee. Iowa, probably go red by more than 10. Vermont, of course, what's his name? Phil Scott has won by like 50% last year, or 2 years ago, maybe even this year again. Of course, he's like a moderate to liberal Republican, pro-choice, so I would say that equates well with the very liberal population of Vermont. As I've said, he's won by like 50% before, so I don't think it's too much of a shocker to say that he will probably win by more than 10%, if he does run for re-election, that is. And our final safe Republican state is going to be Ohio. Once again, term-limited Governor Mike DeWine, open seat. Donald Trump won the state by 11%. And so, of course, like I mentioned in the Senate ones, we just don't have enough data yet for who's running. I mean, well, I'll pull it up and see. Yeah, no one really notable that's running for this seat. It looks like Sherrod Brown and Tim Ryan are listed as potential candidates, but I'm not gonna. I'll refresh this prediction if that actually becomes a reality. I still feel like even though it will be an open seat, Ohio only went to Trump by 11%, 12% this year. I still feel like with Ohio's partisanship, and if neither of those two actually run for the Democratic nomination, then there's not really any notable candidates. So I still feel like Republicans will win Ohio by more than 10% regardless. Alright, and that is the last of the safe Republican governor seats, I believe. Yes. Now let's move on to the safe blue seats. I think I'm going to say California for last. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. Now, yes, Connecticut, even with the past, 3 of the past 4 elections have been very close for Democrats. What's his name? Dan Malloy narrowly won 2020. narrowly won in 2010 and 2014. Ned Lamont narrowly won. It was like a lean margin in 2018, even though that was pretty much a blue wave at the gubernatorial level, except for Florida. But I still think Connecticut will go blue by more than 10. I mean, I don't know about Dan Malloy, but I do know Ned Lamont wasn't very popular after he became governor, so that probably contributed to his narrow victory. Rhode Island, Massachusetts, probably not too controversial. Once again, Rhode Island's been pretty close too. Like 2014 was really close. It was like a 4% win for Gina Raimondo. Massachusetts, I don't think that's too controversial. Maryland, safe blue. My home state, safe blue. I heard Pritzker might be running for a third term. That'd be kind of notable. I mean, I don't think my state has had like a Democratic governor that served 2 full terms without being impeached or killed or convicted, something like that, in like 80 years, something like that. Yeah, just something notable to bring up. Illinois, probably going to be safe Democratic. Colorado, I believe will be safe Democratic. Jared Polis won by a pretty big margin, even as a non-incumbent in 2018. His successor will likely win by more than 10% as well. Like I said, Colorado went to Kamala Harris by more than 10%. An open Democratic seat. A non-incumbent Democrat probably will win by more than 10 as well. And, Hawaii. I forgot about Hawaii. Probably doesn't need much explanation. Hawaii is very, very partisan for the Democrats. Alright, the final one is going to be California. Now, I said I wanted to save this one for last because California really opens up a can of worms. Gavin Newsom is going to be term limited, of course. And let me check. Okay, first I'll go into the Republican side, see who has declared their candidacy. Well, no one notable. The nominee for governor in 2022, Brian Dahl, has publicly expressed interest in running again. On the Democratic side, however, there's only one that I really feel like mentioning. Well, I'm not even going to try and say her name. The lieutenant governor, she's declared her candidacy. One potential candidate, not publicly expressed interest or anything, but there's been articles coming out of her actually maybe running for the seat. One of the potential candidates for a Democratic nomination for governor of California. Well, none other than Kamala Harris. I still think regardless she'll win by more than 10. I mean, even though she had the worst performance in that state since 2004, she still won that state by more than Gavin Newsom did back in 2022 as governor. So you're probably going to win by more than 10. Not too controversial, but it's just a piece of news information that I was really, really interested in seeing. Kamala Harris running for governor. Oh boy. Hey, you know who else ran for governor 2 years after losing a presidential election? Who ran for governor of California? Richard Nixon. Yeah, I'll let you piece that timeline together on your own. So yeah, California gonna be safety. It would be very interesting to see Kamala Harris run. Let's just say that. So, sorry for rambling. That is all of the safe Democratic states for governor elections. Now let's move on to the likely Republican. And I believe there's only 2. One of them, New Hampshire, of course. Kelly Ayotte just got elected by 9%. Now, you may be wondering, well, I'm talking about these people being reelected like, just this past 2 months. And if you didn't know, Vermont and New Hampshire are the only remaining states in the nation to have biannual governor elections instead of every 4 years. It's actually every 2 years. And of course, that's why these 2 seats are going to be up for, re-election in 2 years. Kelly Ayotte, of course, just got elected. Isn't even been sworn in yet, so we don't know plans. But I still feel like, regardless, she wasn't an incumbent, and she still won by 9%. So I still feel like New Hampshire would be likely Republican no matter what. And the other likely Republican state, and our first flip that I'm predicting, Kansas. I do believe Kansas will be a likely Republican. It could turn into safe Republican eventually, but you've got Laura Kelly, who's term limited, and of course, I think a common theme for Kansas is every time a governor serves 2 terms, then the state switches, party of who's controlling the governorship. Democrats controlled it from 2003 to 2009 something. Republicans controlled it from 2009 to 2019. That's because the incumbent had been selected for a cabinet position in Obama. I'm rambling. Kansas will likely flip back. It is a very red state. I believe Donald won it by like 16-something%, and I just feel like it's going to flip back regardless, even if they, I don't know, I don't know anyone who's, let me see if there's anyone who's actually, like, well, Chris Kobach is a potential candidate, I know that much. There's no Democrat who's even expressed interest or considered potential or declared, but I need to stop rambling. Long story short, Kansas will probably be likely Republican, could shift into safe red, and it will be a Republican flip. Alright, now on to the likely Democratic seats. I'm actually going to put Oregon in likely Democrat, not safe, because Oregon Democrats have had a rough couple past elections for governor elections. Not Senate elections, but governor elections. I believe John Kitzhaber, like, narrowly won 2014. Kate Brown narrowly won 2016, 2018. Tina Kotek, just 2 years ago, she only won by, like, 3.5%, which was really close for Oregon, which hasn't, had a Republican governor in, like, I don't know, 20-something years something. And so I do feel like Oregon will probably be likely D. Once again, Tina Kotek will actually be the incumbent in this case, and I don't know what her approval ratings are or anything, but I feel like Oregon's going to be likely D regardless. New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham, despite being an incumbent, only won by like 6% in 2022, so it really does raise the question, could New Mexico turn into lean, tilt, maybe even flip? Who knows? But as of right now, because of New Mexico's partisanship, I'm probably going to list it as likely D. And yeah, even though there might be some Republican candidates like Mark Ronchetti or something that could, I don't know, run for the governor's seat yet again, I still feel like it will be likely Democratic regardless. Next is going to be Minnesota. Tim Walz, good old Tim Walz, yeah, he has actually expressed interest in running for a third term, which, like, good for him if he does, I guess. So, if he runs for re-election, he won by, like, 7%, 8%, 2 years ago, and so probably going to be a likely Democratic, result again. Maybe safe Democratic, but, I'm going to pick caution on Minnesota for that one. Next up will be New York, which, yeah, New York's, like New Hampshire, has also been and New Jersey, has also been a very interesting state this election. I mean, it had the largest shift to the right at the presidential level, but not even focusing on that. New York, Kathy Hochul only won by like 6% 2 years ago, which, of course, Kamala Harris didn't do the greatest in New York, but still won by more than 10%. No, Kathy Hochul only won re-election, well, technically, election to your first full term, by 6% against Lee Zeldin. And she is very unpopular. New York Democrats aren't very well liked in general at this point. I mean, Eric Adams also certainly doesn't help that. I think New York's going to be likely D. Could it shift into safety? Of course. I mean, it's done it multiple times before. But, I mean, with the unpopularity of New York Democrats, I feel like it will probably be a likely D result come 2026. Alright, our final likely D state is going to be the state of Maine. Of course, was a likely D result at the presidential level this year. Janet Mills, I think, she won by 13% 2 years ago, but, term limited, open seat. Maine is considered moderately Democratic. No Democrat has won it by more than 10% since, like, Obama at the presidential level, but not even talking about that. Not talking about the presidential level. Maine's probably going to be likely D, just because it is moderately Democratic. It is going to be an open seat, and so, who knows who they're running. Let me see if... Okay, yeah, it doesn't look like there's anyone really notable running on either side. One of the potential candidates is Jared Golden, but I don't think he'll, sacrifice his seat for Maine's second just to be governor. Alright, so, yeah, Maine probably going to be likely Democratic. Now, let's move on to the lean Republican states, of which I have 3. One of them is going to be the state of Georgia. Now, I can't remember the last time Georgia had a Democratic governor. I could probably search that up right now, but I can search up later or something. Georgia has been relatively Republican at the gubernatorial level. What was his name? Nathan Deal? Yeah, I think he was the governor in 2014. He won re-election by like over 10%. Brian Kemp narrowly won the never really won the seat in 2018, barely staving off a runoff, and then won by like 7-8% in 2022. And so I feel like with him being term limited, another open seat, I feel like it will be lean Republican. It was tilt Republican last time it was an open seat, but I feel like, yeah, I don't know, Georgia's probably going to be lean Republican when it comes to 2026 at the gubernatorial level. Next is going to be the state of Nevada. Joe Lombardo won by a tilt margin 2 years ago, defeating the incumbent. Well, this time he's the incumbent, and of course Nevada Democrats haven't really had the best success. Of course, Catherine Cortez Masto, Jackie Rosen narrowly won re-election to both their seats 2 years ago and 2 months ago, respectively. But Joe Lombardo did defeat the incumbent Democrat in that seat. Even then, Nevada has been. I mean, Brian Sandoval just left the governor's office about 6 years ago. He was a Republican. He won by I think it was 40% or something in 2014. I don't even remember if there was a Democrat in that race. If there was, then, well, yeah, he was really popular. Nevada isn't too much of a shock that it went red at the gubernatorial level. And I feel like that Joe Lombardo, this time him being the incumbent, will probably run for re-election, will probably win by a lean margin in Nevada. So, yeah, Nevada is going to be lean R right now. Now, on to the state of Arizona. Yes, I am listing this as lean R. Now, quick little story. When I posted this onto Reddit, someone was a little irritated at this prediction because, Katie Hobbs went against, Kari Lake despite, making a lot of mistakes or something, I don't remember. And, the reason I'm putting it as lean R, and yes, this is the second flip for Republicans. I believe they will flip the state of Arizona. I have it as lean R because, well, I don't know who has declared their candidacy in the state. Let me check. Well, there goes my reasoning. Yeah, I'll get into that in a second. There's not really very notable people. There's two potential candidates that, I know. You got Charlie Kirk and Kari Lake. If those two run, I don't know, maybe Katie Hobbs has a decent chance. She's already won against Kari Lake once. But the reason I put it as lean R before, I actually might have to change that. In case you hadn't heard, this was just changed, but a couple months back or something, there was rumors that Katie Hobbs would be primaried. She was facing a primary challenge from her successor as Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes. There were rumors that he had expressed interest in launching a primary challenge against her. I don't remember the reasons why, but she is very unpopular, as governor. I searched up her approval ratings. Hang on a second. Yeah, she had a 36% approval rating. Not very great, let's just say. And I had it as lean R because of the threat of a primary challenge. Because had Adrian Fontes... Okay, so there's 3 possible outcomes I launched for this. If Katie Hobbs and Adrian Fontes both ran for the nomination and she won, I'd probably keep it as lean R. Had he won, probably tilt R. And had she not run for re-election and he had run for the nomination, probably put it as tilt D because he won the Secretary of State race by almost 5%. Pretty impressive for, statewide elections for Democrats in that year. But I have just learned that he actually declined. He has officially declined the primary challenge. He's just going to run for re-election as Secretary of State. Probably a smarter option for him. And so, with the primary challenge out of the way, I think I'm going to change it. I think I'm going to change it to tilt Republican. I just still feel like with Katie Hobbs' approval rating, she will narrow it down to less than 2.5% if she does run for re-election. But I honestly I don't know. Arizona went, of course, Ruben Gallego, he won by about 2.4% at the Senate level, but he was running against Kari Lake, so, Donald Trump won the state by 5.5 points, his best performance in any of the battleground states. So Arizona, I just feel like despite the fact it has 2 Democratic senators and a Democratic governor, attorney general, secretary of state, I just still feel like with Katie Hobbs' unpopularity, she will probably lose that election. But that remains to be seen. We can only wait and see. Alright, now we're on to the 3 Rust Belt states. Good lord. We'll start with Pennsylvania. I'm sure Josh Shapiro will run for re-election, and if he does, then I'm going to put it as lean Democratic. He won by almost 14-15% 2022, and that was an open seat. But then again, that was against Doug Mastriano. And so, of course, I mean, Pennsylvania went Republican at the presidential level and the Senate level. They did oust Bob Casey just this year. So, I feel like despite the fact that he is pretty popular, I'm just not going to give him a huge advantage. Of course, I think he's the favorite. I would definitely bet on him winning. Like, if we're going by actual chances, then I'd probably put likely. But in terms of margins, I just feel like even with his popularity and, moderation, I still feel like he'll win by, like, less than 5. But I feel like it will actually be a complete role reversal of the presidential and Senate elections this year. And Pennsylvania will be the strongest Democratic out of the 3 Rust Belt states for governor elections. So Pennsylvania, I'm going to list as leading D. Alright, now, these 2 states, I really had difficulty deciding. In Wisconsin, Tony Evers has, I believe, publicly expressed interest in running for a 3rd term, much like Tim Walz. And I feel like if he does, then, he's got the incumbency advantage, and he, in fact, won re-election by 3.4%, and so he can definitely be re-elected. And I feel like, I don't know what his approvals are and stuff, but I feel like if he does run for re-election, then he will probably win, and I will probably put that as tilt Democratic. If he doesn't run, then it probably does flip back, Wisconsin does. But, of course, like I've mentioned multiple times, we don't have enough data yet, and we don't know who's running exactly, so I'm just going to go off, the incumbency advantage for Wisconsin. If he runs for re-election, of course, I do think that it will be a tilt Democratic margin. Okay, well, now we have definitely the toss-uppy of toss-ups of governor elections. Michigan. Yeah. Actually, this event I'm going to talk about actually inspired me to make my first predictions for this. It was a couple weeks back, but oh boy, Michigan. Well, let's just go over the, all the, candidates and stuff first. The Democratic side, the people who have actually publicly expressed interest, you have Pete Buttigieg. There's so many people who can't say the last name correctly. Of course, he just moved to Michigan just a couple years ago. Obviously, he was South Bend, Indiana mayor, and so he runs, who knows. Jocelyn Benson, the Michigan Secretary of State, who gained, like, nationwide notoriety after, all the 2020 fiascos and stuff. And she actually, in 2022, she won re-election as, to Secretary of State by an unexpected margin. Like, it was much larger than people were expecting. They probably thinking it was going to be like 6-7%. I think she won by like 13%. She did even better than Gretchen Whitmer. And so if she runs, I do think, if she does end up being the nominee, I do think she has a good chance at winning. If she is the nominee, I feel like she is going to be the favorite to win. Even with this, what's it called? Wench? Even with this curveball being thrown. The Republican side, the candidates that have publicly expressed interest, we have Tudor Dixon, which, I'm just going to say right now, even with this curveball, I feel like if she's the nominee, no, Democrats will Republicans won't win. I say that very specifically, and you'll find out why. I'm sure if Tudor Dixon becomes the nominee, I just don't feel like that there's going to be a 10.6 shift to the right in her favor after losing by more than 10 points in the last gubernatorial election. I feel like if she's the nominee, yeah, they just aren't going to win. There's not really many other there's no other candidates notably in the publicly expressed interest section. As for the potential section, you've got John James, of course, Mike Rogers, who almost won the Senate election, even in an open seat. He still lost, but who knows? He can always make a comeback. And that was definitely proven. Candace Miller, Oh wait, that is not who I was thinking of. Never mind. I was thinking of Candace Owens for a second. Oops. I don't know anything about Candace Miller. I just got the names confused. That's why I thought she was notable, but no. Alright, so, the event that I've been talking about, that I have said prevents Michigan from being like a lean D, tilt the, prediction. The one reason why I think Democrats are in trouble of holding on to the seat is because the mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, has officially launched an independent campaign. Oh, I hope that didn't screw up my footage. My computer just shut off because I was AFK. Oh god, please don't corrupt that. He has launched an independent campaign for governor of Michigan. And reminder, he is the mayor of the largest city in the state. And Detroit, of course, is the biggest source for Democratic turnout. So if the mayor of the largest source of Democratic turnout is launching an independent campaign, then, most of the most of the voters there, the people who often hand Democrats victories in that state, if the mayor of that town is running for governor as a third-party candidate, and, what's usually the bastion of Democratic voters, I feel like he's going to siphon so many votes away from, Detroit, the largest city in the state, that it's going to seriously put Democrats in jeopardy. Even, like, if you're going against Tudor Dixon or something, really, either one of them maybe could win. It is possible. If Jocelyn Benson runs, I do feel like she would probably win. But, of course, she's not declared anything. It's literally possible for all three parties, quote-unquote, to win this gubernatorial election come 2026. And so, I ultimately landed for my official prediction, until we get more declared candidates on both sides, that as of right now, unless Tudor Dixon becomes the nominee, I am going to put Michigan as tilt Republican, their third gubernatorial flip. And that's because, Michigan's not too unheard of flipping red. Rick Snyder was the governor for 8 years, and just left office almost 6 years ago. I feel like Michigan is likely to flip red, but I feel like if Mike Duggan wasn't running for this gubernatorial seat, I feel like Democrats would definitely be favored, especially if you got Jocelyn Benson, who, won her election by almost 13 points or something in 2022. I feel like without him, they would definitely be favored. I'd probably put it as lean to likely D, but with him, siphoning a lot of the votes from the Democratic turnout center, I just feel like it really puts them in jeopardy and, to the advantage of Republicans. And so, unless Tudor Dixon's the nominee, probably, then I don't know. Mike Duggan, from what I've heard, isn't too unpopular with Republicans either. So he could maybe even siphon Republican votes, which, also prevents, the spoiler effect, where, his appeal to some Republicans probably prevents this from being, an automatic, 1912 presidential election scenario, where, Republicans would win Michigan only because of his introductory. No, I feel like that all three parties, quote-unquote, could win with him in the race, even if unless Tudor Dixon's the nominee. I feel like his candidacy will ultimately harm the Democrats and cause Michigan to turn back red. And so, as of right now, until we get more data, until we get more declaration of candidate declarations, then I am going to put Michigan as tilt red, the third Republican flip of 2026 governor elections. So, there it is. That is my prediction, my 2026 gubernatorial elections prediction. So, of course, as you can see at the top, this is only accounting gubernatorial seats that are up for election that year. Not, in total. As of right now, let me see. Just give me a second. As of right now, the control of the gubernatorial chambers and stuff, Republicans have 27, Democrats have 23. Of course, the Virginia and New Jersey races haven't happened yet, but let's just say that neither of them flip, both of them stay Republican and Democratic. Well, then that means that they will have a 30-20 control of the governorships. So, ultimately, it looks like 2026, of course, there's a lot of people saying that just because Donald Trump's in office, then like, oh, it's immediately going to be a blue wave, but that is not... crap, happened again. I really hope this whole video does not get corrupted. Just because Donald Trump's in office doesn't mean that it's going to be a blue wave. As a matter of fact, I don't think it'll be... It's not going to be a red wave per se, not immediately, but it looks like it might be a blue ripple. It might just, just not be too successful for either sides. Republicans would probably get the benefit of, flipping 3 governor seats, but either way, it does look like the 2026 midterms are not going to be the greatest for the Democrats. Just what it looks like. So, yeah, that is my Senate and gubernatorial predictions. We are 23 months out from the 2026 elections, and so, like I've mentioned, as we get more data in, as we get more candidate declarations, well, then I'll update the predictions. But this is my first prediction on this channel. This is my first video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. As always, just if you decide to leave a comment, just please make it civil. I literally have no problem disagreeing with people as long as they're civil. If you wanna give your own opinion on how this is gonna go, feel free to. Reddit surely gave me their opinions. A lot of people were unhappy, as I mentioned. So yeah, I don't know what more else to say. Also, I apologize if you just don't like how I ramble sometimes. It's just something I can't control, so if that part bugs you, I apologize. Fortunately, I can't change that. So yeah, as I've mentioned, be civil in the comments if you're going to leave a comment, and give me your own predictions if you feel you want to. Of course, I love seeing other people's predictions and giving feedback on them. So yeah, I guess there's not much more to say. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.